The NBA wants you to think everything that happens in this league comes down to luck and talent. But what if I told you that's not entirely true? What if some of the biggest moments in NBA history weren't left to chance at all? We're talking about draft lotteries with odds so impossible they don't make sense on paper. Referees who somehow find the whistle right when a series needs a Game 7. Suspensions that magically show up the moment a team gets too dangerous to beat. And trades that get blocked out of nowhere, while other ones get rewarded like the league is saying thank you. Some of this isn't just speculation anymore. We're talking about actual FBI investigations, convicted felons, a commissioner who, when asked point blank if the lottery was rigged, basically just shrugged and said as long as people spell the league's name right, he doesn't care what they think. So today we're going deep. 3 chapters. We're starting with the NBA draft because that's where this whole thing kicks off, all the way back with Patrick Ewing and the Knicks back in 1985. Then we're moving into the referees, starting with the one guy who actually got caught red-handed. And then we're closing things out with the league office itself and the suspensions and trades they've used to control who wins and who doesn't. So why don't you grab a seat? Because this one's gonna make you look at every ring, every draft pick, and every whistle a whole lot differently. Let's go all the way back to 1985, because this is where the whole story starts. Up until this point, the NBA had never used a lottery before. Before 1985, the team with the worst record just got the first pick automatically. Simple as that. But there was a problem with that system, and the problem was tanking. Teams were starting to lose on purpose. This created bad basketball, bad ratings, and bad business. So the league needed a fix. The NBA decided to roll out something brand new, a lottery. All 7 non-playoff teams get tossed into the mix, each one getting their own envelope, and each one getting the exact same odds, 1 in 7. It sounds about as fair as you could possibly make it back then. Now, here's where it gets interesting. That same year, there's a kid coming out of Georgetown who scouts are calling a generational talent, a guy who can change a franchise overnight. His name was Patrick Ewing. And out of every team in that lottery, you know who needed him most? The New York Knicks. See, the Knicks weren't just any team. They were the Knicks, the biggest market in the league. You know, Madison Square Garden. The kind of franchise the NBA needed to be relevant, needed to be profitable, needed to be good television. And in 1985, well, they were terrible. They were a losing team sitting in the biggest city in the country, bleeding money and bleeding fans. So when Commissioner David Stern pulled out the envelope on live television, and it's the Knicks logo staring back at him, they saw a business decision. Because let's think about the timing real quick. This is the very first lottery the league had ever done. And somehow, in year 1, the biggest market team walks away with the best player available, right when the league needed them back on top. Now, here's where the real theories kick in. People started saying the envelope was frozen. Stern could feel which one was cold and just pulled that one out. Others said it wasn't frozen. It was bent. That one corner of the Knicks envelope got creased when an accountant slammed it into the drum, and Stern felt around for that crease on purpose. And you're probably wondering why I mentioned the accountant. Well, that detail matters, because get this. The firm running that exact lottery, Ernst & Winnie, was the exact same accounting firm that worked with the Knicks' own ownership group, Gulf and Western. So you've got the guys physically handing the envelopes tied directly to the team that ends up winning. You all know that Stern was asked about this for years, and his response became legendary.
Do you find the theories silly? Are they a nuisance at this point? Do you just expect them?
We expect them.
He basically shrugged the whole thing off and said, quote, "If people want to say that, fine, as long as they spell our league name right." That's not a denial. That's a guy who knows the story is good for business either way. And Patrick Ewing himself, even he's joked about it. Years later, he brought up the cold envelope himself, laughing it off in interviews, saying he'd heard all the theories just like everyone else. He's never confirmed anything, but he's never exactly shut it down either. He even said if it was rigged, he's glad it was rigged for the Knicks.
But you know what? It might have been fixed. I don't care. I ended up where I was supposed to end up. New York needed to have a strong team to, make the league stronger.
So that's Ewing, the first lottery the league ever ran, and somehow the exact result the NBA needed most. But here's the thing. If this was a one-time coincidence, maybe we can let this go. Except it wasn't a one-time thing, because just a few years later, in 1993, it happened again. The Orlando Magic, a small market team that had no business getting this lucky, ended up winning the lottery for the second year in a row. First, it was Shaquille O'Neal in 92. Then, somehow, with odds around 1 in 66, the worst odds of any team in the entire lottery, they ended up winning again and landed Chris Webber, who they immediately flipped for Penny Hardaway.
Orlando Magic is sitting with me for the second time in as many years. Now,
last year, when you nabbed Shaquille, you had statistically an excellent chance. Here's your reaction this year, when you had just one chance in 66.
And here's what makes this one even weirder. The actual drawing, the part where they pick the ball combinations that decide the order, happened entirely behind closed doors for the first ever time. Fans never saw it. All anyone ever saw on live television was David Stern pulling envelopes out and announcing the results after the fact. No cameras on the actual selection, just Stern, some officials, and a room nobody outside the league ever got to look inside. And then decades later, Shaq himself throws gasoline on the whole thing. He tells the story about how David Stern pulling him aside months before the '92 draft.
Even before the lottery, he said, "You want to play where it's hot or where it's cold?" And I said, "Hot." Then Orlando gets the ball.
And just a few months later, guess who wins the lottery? The Orlando Magic. Sunny Florida. Shaq's dream landing spot delivered right on schedule. Back-to-back miracle lottery wins, a secret room nobody could see into, and Shaq's own commissioner allegedly asking him where he wanted to play before the balls had even dropped. The system was so broken after this that the league had to redesign the entire lottery from scratch. And then you can fast forward to 2003. You guys heard of LeBron James, right? You know, the kid from Akron, Ohio, the best prospect anyone's seen. And what about the team that wins the right to draft him? That's right, it's the Cleveland Cavaliers, his hometown team. Now, on paper, Cleveland actually had the best odds in the lottery that year, a 22.5% chance, tied for the top spot. So on the surface, this one looks the most legitimate of the bunch. But that hasn't stopped the theories. And it definitely hasn't stopped LeBron himself. In 2025, he went on the Pat McAfee show and basically said it himself, joking that it was a little too convenient how the league keeps sending its biggest homegrown stars back to where they grew up. Ewing to the Knicks, Rose to the Bulls, and of course, LeBron to Cleveland. Which brings us to Derrick Rose in 2008. The Chicago Bulls had a 1.7% chance, one of the worst odds in the entire lottery, and somehow they still win it.
Derrick Rose, Chicago native. Now you're playing for the Chicago Bulls in the house that Michael Jordan built. What are you feeling right now?
And the guy they get to draft? Well, of course, he was a kid who grew up right there in Chicago, a hometown legend before he'd even play a single NBA game. The Bulls needed a new face after the Jordan era. The city needed a new hero. And somehow the ping pong balls delivered exactly that. And this hometown pattern is really the whole point, because think about what the league gets every single time this happens. A built-in fan base, which means instant ticket sales. A story the media doesn't even have to manufacture because it sort of just writes itself. A kid from the neighborhood saving the team he grew up watching. That's not just good basketball. That's a marketing department's dream, landing in their lap over and over and over again. Now, let's talk about New Orleans, because this one might be the most suspicious of them all. In 2019, the Pelicans won the lottery with only a 6% chance, just weeks after their franchise player, Anthony Davis, publicly demanded a trade out of the city. And who do they land? Zion Williamson, one of the most hyped prospects in college basketball history. A guy who could single-handedly keep a wounded franchise from walking away for good.
Williamson, a rejection. What a block by Zion Williamson.
And that exactly hasn't panned out well, but they thought it would. And here's the part that makes this one even messier. Back in 2012, this franchise wasn't even called the Pelicans yet. They were the New Orleans Hornets. And at the time, the NBA didn't just own a piece of that team. The league owned the entire franchise outright, after buying it a couple years earlier just to keep it from leaving New Orleans. So when the Hornets won that lottery and landed Anthony Davis, the organization handing out the ping pong balls and the organization that stood to benefit the most from the results were literally the exact same people. Just months later, the league sold the team to a new owner who rebranded them as the Pelicans. So the franchise Anthony Davis actually got drafted into technically didn't even exist yet. He was drafted by a team the NBA itself owned, which ended up becoming the Pelicans immediately after. Now let's bring this all the way to today, because none of this is ancient history. Like, this is happening right now. In 2025, you guys already know what I'm about to talk about. The Dallas Mavericks made one of the most hated trades in the history of the sport, sending away their franchise player, Luka Doncic. And it wasn't just who they traded, it was where he went. The Los Angeles Lakers, not some random small market team, the biggest, the most valuable, the most nationally televised franchise in the entire league. Let's be real here, it's a global brand sitting in the second biggest media market in the country. And that part matters, because a trade like this doesn't happen by accident. A 25-year-old, a top 5 player in the league, not even in his prime yet, doesn't just get moved away for pennies on the dollar unless somebody very high up wants him somewhere very specific. I can assure you, this was not about basketball. This was about business. The Lakers needed a new face for the next decade, and Dallas just handed them one. As you all know, the fans revolted. Front office got torn apart online. I don't even want to say the guy's name.
This is ridiculous. This is crazy, man. We went to the NBA Finals. Why are we trading the best player, the franchise player? He's supposed to have a statue.
It became one of the worst PR disasters the league has ever seen. And then, just months later, the very next lottery, Dallas wins it with a 1.8% chance. One of the worst odds on the entire board. And what do they walk away with? Cooper Flag, the most hyped prospect to enter this league in years. A team that just torched its own fan base somehow gets handed the exact player it needed to win them all back. What I think the craziest part about this trade wasn't even the fact that I believe it was rigged. It's that somehow, after trading a generational talent in Luka to the Lakers, the Mavericks look like they have a better future. Am I wrong? So look at the pattern here. Over and over again, across 4 decades, the team that needed the miracle the most is the team that typically gets it. So that's the draft. 4 decades of impossible odds, secret rooms, hometown heroes, and business decisions dressed up as ping pong balls. But the draft is just the beginning, because getting the right players into the right cities is one thing. Deciding who wins once they're actually on the court, that's a whole different level of control. So that brings us to our second chapter, which is the referees. Because if the draft is where the NBA sets the stage, the officials are the ones holding the script once the cameras start rolling. And unlike the lottery, where everything's still technically just theories and odds and coincidences, this next part is not a theory at all. This one's proven in federal court. And before we move on, I have to show you guys something really cool. We all grew up ripping packs, right? Tearing through that wrapper, have your heart pounding and hoping you hit something insane. That feeling never went away. We just grew up and instead convinced ourselves that it was somehow childish. Courtyard brought it back and made it smarter. Courtyard is a marketplace where you can open packs, own real physical collectibles, and trade them instantly around the world without ever touching a box, buying a stamp, or praying that the guy on eBay isn't scamming you. Your cards sit in their vault, fully insured at market value, stored for free in a temperature-controlled facility. And when you want the physical item, they'll just ship it to you. And I feel like I have to mention this, but there's no buyer fees, no seller fees. Authenticity is guaranteed on everything. They have Pokemon cards, sports cards, comic books, pretty much everything, and yet there's still more coming. And every pack you get comes with a guaranteed buyback offer at fair market value. So if you open something and it's not for you, you can sell it back instantly. Courtyard is pioneering the next generation of commerce through gamified shopping, and it's actually insanely cool. So make sure you go to courtyard.io and use my code JZUncut15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, the code is JZUncut15, or use the QR code, or use the link down in the description. Major thanks again to Courtyard for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to it. So let's talk about the most infamous referee in NBA history. Let's talk about Tim Donaghy. Tim Donaghy spent 13 years as an NBA referee. Not some rookie nobody trusted with big games either. He worked playoff games. He worked nationally televised matchups. The league decided to put him on the floor for some of the biggest moments in basketball, trusting him to call it straight. And for at least 4 straight seasons, from 2003 all the way to 2007, he wasn't calling it straight at all. He was betting on games. Games he was officiating himself. Think about how insane that actually is. Here's how it actually unraveled. The FBI wasn't even looking for him. They were investigating organized crime. Once they pulled on that thread, they found a referee who'd been feeding inside information to gamblers, including his own picks on games he was assigned to work that same night. This isn't some fan trying to guess who wins. This is the guy with the whistle in his hand, the guy who decides which fouls get called and which ones don't. Betting on the outcome he has direct influence over. Donaghy ended up pleading guilty to 2 federal charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud and transmitting betting information across state lines. He was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because Donaghy didn't just quietly go away after that. He ended up writing a book. It's called Personal Foul. And in it, he doesn't just admit to what he did. He starts pointing fingers at the entire system. He claims certain referees, guys he calls, quote, company men, were essentially instructed to manage the outcomes and the length of a playoff series. He specifically named veteran referee Dick Bavetta, claiming, quote, anytime Bavetta referees, you'll rarely see a blowout. Which means, according to Donaghy, Bavetta had a pattern of keeping games artificially close. He also went further, later alleging in a court filing that 2 separate referees essentially fixed a specific playoff game on behalf of the league. And don't worry, we're gonna get into that exact game in just a minute, because it's one of the most talked about officiating conspiracies in NBA history. Now, to be fair, federal investigators looked into Donaghy's bigger claims, the idea that this was some league-wide organized system of rigging outcome, and they didn't find enough to back it up. One prosecutor put it bluntly, saying the only criminal conduct here is that of Mr. Donaghy. So legally, it really is just him. One guy, one gambling addiction, one specific scheme. But here's why this story matters so much for everything else in this video. Before Donaghy, if you said the NBA was rigged, you just sounded like a guy with aluminum foil on his head. After Donaghy, you're just pointing at a documented fact. A real referee actually betting on actual games, actually getting caught, actually getting convicted, and actually being sent to prison. He's the reason every other theory in this chapter gets taken very seriously. Let's go back before Donaghy ever got caught, because this next game is the one he actually pointed to himself. It was the Western Conference Finals in 2002. Sacramento Kings versus the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are already sitting on back-to-back championships, chasing a third straight. The Kings are the best team in the league that season by record, and they're up 3-2. One more win, and the Lakers don't even make it to the NBA Finals. It was Game 6, and this is the game people still bring up over 20 years later. The Lakers ended up shooting 40 free throws in that game. 40! And it's not spread out evenly either. In the fourth quarter alone, the Lakers went to the line 27 times and ended up making 21 of them. In one quarter, the Lakers attempted more free throws than the entire Kings team attempted in the entire game. Sacramento's total for all 4 quarters combined was 25. Vlade Divac fouls out. Scott Pollard fouls out. The Kings are getting whistled off the floor, and the Lakers are living at the free throw line.
Weber has a great block on this ball. I'm not sure where any foul is other than Kobe jumping into defenders who are backing up.
Sacramento's head coach Rick Adelman tore into the officiating afterwards, and honestly, he wasn't the only one. Consumer advocate Ralph Nader, and yeah, the same Ralph Nader who ended up running for president, well, he actually got involved. He publicly called for a formal investigation into the officiating of this game. Years later, he said Commissioner David Stern was, quote, cordial but imperious, and that the league never actually investigated it. He called the whole response a whitewash. Now here's where it all circles back to Donaghy. In a later court filing, he directly alleged that 2 referees in this exact game were, quote, company men, and that the game had essentially been fixed to extend the series and protect the league's bigger market team. And it's not just Donaghy's word either. The NBA eventually ran its own internal review, and even the league's own review admitted that this game had been poorly officiated, pointing to 15 missed calls, 8 of them favoring the Lakers, and only 6 of them favoring the Kings. So even by the league's own math, the Lakers came out ahead on the missed calls in the exact game that mattered the most. To this day, Kings fans consider this one of the biggest robberies in NBA playoff history. And honestly, when you put the free throw disparity next to Nader's demand for an investigation, also throw in the Donaghy's allegations, next to the league's own internal admission that this game was badly officiated, it's not hard to see why this one still gets brought up every single year. I mean, hell, as a Pistons fan in these recent playoffs, I know they didn't play great, and I know Cade was dealing with injuries, but the Cleveland Cavaliers had close to 100 more free throws than the Pistons did in the entire series. I'm not gonna get into it. The wound is still fresh, but Mark Davis, I'm on to you. Now let's go back to 2006, because this one might have the most insane individual stat line in this entire video. And if this were to happen today, then nobody would be calling Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a free throw merchant. Just wait. It was the NBA Finals, the Dallas Mavericks versus the Miami Heat. Dallas took a 2-0 lead, dominated early, looking like they were about to run away with their first championship in franchise history. And then Miami flipped the switch. Not through defense, not through some tactical adjustment, through the free throw line. Dwayne Wade attempted 97 free throws in this entire series. For context, Dirk Nowitzki, the best player on the Mavs, attempted 55 for the entire series. Wade alone attempted more than the entire Mavericks roster combined in some of these games. And it gets even crazier when you zoom into Game 5. Wade goes to the line 25 times in a single game. He ended up making 21 of them. This was a finals record that still stands today. 25 free throw attempts by one player in one game. That's a stat line that should never have existed. The only player that comes to mind who got 25 free throws in a game was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this past season, getting 25 free throws against my depleted Pistons team in the regular season. But like, that's the regular season, you know? This is the NBA Finals in a pivotal Game 5. As I was recording this, I forgot that Bam also had 43 free throws when he got his 83 points. I'm sorry. Mark Cuban, who was Dallas's owner, completely lost it. He actually walked out onto the court to confront referee Joe DeRosa, screaming at him in front of everybody. He got fined $250,000 by the league for it, one of the largest fines in NBA history at the time. And by most accounts, he wasn't just yelling about one call. Witnesses said that he was shouting towards the commissioner's office directly, telling them that their league was rigged.
I don't care. Ask me a real question, okay?
And Cuban will never let this one go. To this day, he says that he'll take it to his grave, that he genuinely believed that 2006 was fixed.
You know, and Dwayne Wade goes to the free throw line 973 times, right?
He He actually went out and hired a former FBI agent, a guy named Warren Flagg, just to look into it. And according to Cuban, Flagg told him that he'd win a lawsuit if he ever wanted to pursue it. You gotta wonder why he hasn't, right? Dwayne Wade, on the other hand, has defended himself pretty much every time this comes up. His response has always basically been the same.
The work that I put in as a young guy to do something that not a lot of young guys have done in this game, to say it was rigged. Mark, stop that.
We won the series. Yes, I got some calls, but every superstar gets calls. That's just how it works at that level.
I don't know, but it wasn't rigged. Like, we still had to play the game.
But here's the thing. 97 free throws in one series, 25 in a single game, an owner accusing the league of rigging it to his face, a $250,000 fine just for saying it out loud. That's not a normal series. That's one of the most talked about officiating controversies this league has ever seen.
Is this the worst loss that you've ever experienced? No, when I was 3 years old and I was playing on the Pee Wee team, we got beat in the last second. Ask me a real question, okay?
Now, everything we've talked about so far in this chapter, the free throw disparities in Sacramento and Miami, even Donaghy's bigger claims about the company men refs. All of this still lives in a gray area. Well, except Donaghy, he's guilty. These free throw disparities are suspicious, sure, but not always proven. This next part isn't gray at all. This is happening right now, in real time, with actual federal charges attached. Let's start with Jontay Porter. In April of 2024, the NBA handed him a lifetime ban, only the second player in league history to get one, right behind former owner of the Clippers, Donald Sterling. The league found out he'd been feeding confidential health information to bettors, and even limiting his own play on the court to help specific bets hit. In one game that March, someone placed an $80,000 parlay betting Porter would underperform. He ended up playing 3 minutes, said he felt sick, and left. That bet almost paid out over $1 million before the sportsbook froze it. Porter later pleaded guilty in federal court. Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier is accused of signaling ahead of time that he'd leave a 2023 game early. Letting associates cash in on nearly $200,000 in bets that his stats would come in under the number. And then there's Chauncey Billups, Mr. Big Shot himself. Finals MVP with the Pistons back in 2004. An actual legend in Detroit. A guy with a statue-level legacy in this city. Now Portland's head coach. Well, was, because he ended up getting swept into a separate rigged poker case in the same exact investigation. And then there's Damon Jones. And this one's personal in a way that none of them are, because Jones wasn't just some guy with league access. He was LeBron James's actual teammate on the Cavaliers back in the mid-2000s. And the two stayed close for years after that. Close enough that he had informal access to the Lakers locker room in 2023, sitting in on practices and shoot-arounds like he was actually on the staff. And prosecutors say that's exactly what he used. According to the indictment, Jones allegedly texted a group of bettors before a Lakers game against the Bucks, telling them to get money down before the information went public, because LeBron was going to be out that night. His actual message read, quote, "Get a big bet on Milwaukee tonight before the information is out. He's out tonight. Bet enough so D Jones can eat too now." He's accused of doing the same thing with Anthony Davis's injury status too. And here's the part that makes it worse. LeBron reportedly had no idea any of this was happening. According to people close to him, he didn't know Jones was leaking his own injury status behind his back to be sold off for cash. The friendship had already quietly fallen apart by the time the charges came out. All three, Rozier, Billups, and Jones, get placed on immediate leave by the league.
Say Jones, NBA Hall of Famer Chauncey Billups, and others lured unsuspecting poker players to games rigged by the mob.
And then there's Malik Beasley. And honestly, out of every name in this entire video, this is the one that hits the hardest for me personally. Beasley was a massive part of the Pistons turning things around. After years of being one of the worst teams in the league, he came in and was one of the most electric parts of that turnaround.
Beasley, another heat check. Yeah, he's hot.
And that shimmy shake after a big three was one of my favorite things to watch all season long. He even followed me on Twitter. Speaking of which, Jay-Z Uncut, follow me. He earned what was coming for him. He was about to walk into a 3-year, $42 million deal from the Pistons. And then the day free agency opened in 2025, the investigation broke. He's now facing federal charges. Wire fraud, bribery, money laundering conspiracy, accused of intentionally underperforming on prop bets back in the 2023-24 season while he was sitting on a serious gambling debt. That contract disappeared overnight. He maintains his innocence, but as a fan, this one stings different. You watch a guy fight his way back into relevance, become a fun, likable piece of a team that you love, and then you later find out that he may have been cheating the entire time. for money he didn't even need because he was about to get paid the right way anyway. That's the tragedy buried inside all of this. It's not just the draft lotteries and referees anymore. We're talking about real NBA players in real time, allegedly throwing away real careers. So that's the referees and that's the gamblers, whistles that swing games, and players and coaches selling out their own teammates for a payday. But there's one more layer to all of this, one we haven't touched yet, because everything so far has been about people inside the game, refs, players, coaches, breaking all the rules on their own. This last chapter is very different. This one's about the league itself, the front office, the commissioner's desk, the moments where the NBA didn't just fail to stop something rigged. They were the one doing the rigging. And there's no better place to start this chapter than with the most powerful, most untouchable player the league had ever had. Because even Michael Jordan, at the absolute peak of his powers, couldn't escape the league making a decision about him behind closed doors. Let's talk about the year that Michael Jordan retired. The year is 1993. Michael Jordan's the biggest star on the planet. Back-to-back-to-back champion. The most dominant player anyone had ever seen. And then, out of nowhere, he retires. Walks away from basketball completely.
I've reached the pinnacle of my career. I've achieved a lot in that short amount of time, if you want to call it short. I just feel that I don't have anything else for myself to prove.
And goes to go play minor league baseball instead. The official story was grief. His father, James Jordan, had been taken away from him just a few months earlier, and Jordan said he needed to step away from the game to fully process that. That part is real, and it's a completely legitimate reason for anybody to need to take a break from their entire life. But almost immediately, a second story starts circulating, one that has nothing to do with grief at all, because it comes out that Jordan had a serious gambling problem. A businessman actually wrote an entire book about it, claiming Jordan lost somewhere around $1.3 million to him betting on golf games. Jordan pushed back hard on that number, but he didn't deny that the betting happened, and he just said the amount was exaggerated. On top of that, Jordan had been spotted in an Atlantic City casino the night before a playoff game, which obviously did not help the optics. Commissioner David Stern ended up bringing in a former federal judge to formally look into Jordan's gambling. So now you've got the biggest star in the league dealing with a real gambling investigation. At the exact same time, he suddenly steps away from the game entirely. And that's where the theory kicks in. The idea that Stern didn't just investigate Jordan, that the league actually suspended him quietly behind the scenes, and he let Jordan save face by calling it a retirement instead.
How can it not be a serious concern if the most prominent figure in the league is involved persistently in high-stakes gambling?
Well, what's your debt structure, Bob? How much money do you owe?
It doesn't make any difference. I don't represent the NBA. I'm the reporter.
Basically, take a year off, go play baseball, and we'll all pretend that this was your decision. Michael Jordan has denied this directly, more than once. His exact words were, quote, "There's no truth to that. I needed a break. My father just passed." His former teammate Horace Grant has backed him up on this too, and so have plenty of people who have covered the team closely at the time. But the theory never fully went away, and honestly, The Last Dance documentary brought it right back into the mainstream media a few years ago, introducing the whole story to a new generation of fans who'd never heard of it before, like me. I never heard of this before. Now, I do want to be clear, there's no hard proof of an actual secret suspension. No paperwork, no confirmation, there's absolutely nothing concrete. What we do know for a fact is that the gambling was real. The investigation was real.
Yes, we're involved in a series of investigations on the subject.
And the timing was suspicious enough that even decades later, people still aren't fully convinced that the retirement was the entire story.
I do not have a problem. I enjoy gambling.
So that's Jordan, the biggest star the league ever had. And even he couldn't fully escape the front office making a decision about his career behind closed doors. But here's the thing about that kind of power. Once the league is willing to use it on its biggest star, it's definitely willing to use it on everybody else too. Nobody's safe. And sometimes it doesn't even need to be a scandal as an excuse. Sometimes all it needs is a rule book and the willingness to enforce it at exactly the wrong moment. Which brings us to 2007 and one of the most infuriating suspensions in NBA history. It was the Phoenix Suns versus the San Antonio Spurs in the Western Conference semifinals. This Suns team was must-watch basketball. You've heard of them, the 7 seconds or less era, Steve Nash running the show, one of the most fun and dangerous teams in the league.
Stoudemire and picked up by Diaw, Nash, Marion. Spectacular basketball by the Phoenix Suns.
A real threat to actually win it all that year. Then we have Game 4. Robert Horry, off the ball, blindsided Steve Nash with a hip check, sending him flying into the scorer's table. It was a dirty and unnecessary play, and the bench is emptied as guys react to seeing their point guard get hit like that.
Did you have any inclination, or did you see where Amari was?
I have no idea. I was seeing stars from the check.
Here's the part that matters, though. Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw never even threw a punch. They didn't fight anybody. All they did was step a few feet off the bench, which is technically against the rule that says players cannot leave the bench area during an altercation. And because of that one rule, the league suspends both of them for Game 5. Not Horry, who actually started it, Stoudemire and Diaw, two of Phoenix's best players, sat out for doing basically nothing. Phoenix ended up losing that series in 6 games. And a huge chunk of the NBA world was furious about it. Raja Bell straight up said that there wasn't a shred of fairness in that decision. Coach Mike D'Antoni said you couldn't find a shred of fairness or common sense in it either. Commissioner Stern's response was just, the rule is the rule. And look, technically, Stern wasn't wrong. The rule did exist, but that's exactly the problem. The league had full discretion on how strictly to enforce it, and they chose the most strict way possible at the exact moment that it would hurt the most dangerous team left in the playoffs. And now I hope all of you guys are seeing the difference between a Stern-ran league and a Silver-ran league. We've seen Adam Silver ignore this rule countless of times. Even in the most recent NBA Finals between the Spurs and Knicks, they punished the team in the Suns that many people thought had the best shot at finally taking down the Spurs. So once again, this wasn't a bent envelope, not a bad whistle, just a rule that was enforced in the most damaging way possible, at the most convenient time possible. Now, this next one is different from everything else in this chapter, because this isn't a story about the league letting something happen behind the scenes. This is the league flat out stopping something in public with its own signature on the decision. The year was 2011. Chris Paul is one of the best point guards on the planet, and he's playing for the New Orleans Hornets. Remember, this is right around the same stretch we talked about earlier, where the NBA actually owned this franchise outright. The league wasn't just watching from a distance, they were the ownership group. A trade gets put together. A real one. 3 teams involved, completely agreed upon by everybody at the table. Chris Paul's heading to the Lakers, pairing up with Kobe Bryant. On paper, it's done, signed and delivered. And then David Stern, acting on behalf of the league, kills it. Blocks the entire trade himself, citing what he called basketball reasons, which honestly never got much more specific on that. Other owners, guys like Dan Gilbert and Mark Cuban, had been furious behind the scenes about the Lakers getting even better. And shortly after that, the deal was dead. Chris Paul ended up with the Clippers instead just a few days later. And here's the part that really matters. To this day, that's still the only trade in NBA history that's ever been vetoed like this.
I didn't veto anything. Acting on behalf of the owners, as the owners rep, New Orleans decided not to make the trade.
Now, notice what actually got stopped here. It wasn't a small market team improving. It was the Lakers, the biggest, most profitable, most nationally televised franchise in the entire league. They were about to get even stronger. And the second that started costing other owners money and leverage, the league that owned the team making the trade suddenly discovered a reason to shut it down. Because let's be honest, if sending Chris Paul to the Lakers had been good for the NBA's bottom line the way sending Luka there was, you can bet this trade goes through without a single complaint. The league didn't block this trade because it was against the rules. They blocked it because for once, helping the Lakers wasn't the move that made them the most money. Now let's fast forward to 2016. Because this one's more recent, and it's got one of the most viral reactions in NBA history attached to it. It was the Golden State Warriors versus the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA Finals. Golden State's up 3-1, one win away from wrapping up the title and completing a record-breaking 73-win season. And here's the thing about a 3-1 hole in the finals. Up to this exact point, no team in NBA history had ever come back from it. Not once. It's basically over. Except right before Game 5. The league goes back and reviews a play from Game 4, where Draymond Green swiped at LeBron James during a scuffle. In real time, it barely even got a whistle. The NBA retroactively upgrades it to a flagrant foul point, and because of the league's own suspension system, that extra point pushes Draymond over the threshold, thus suspending him for Game 5.
The fact that this is the NBA Finals, for a call like this to be made, I think is as egregious as it gets. I think it's a disgusting decision on a part of the NBA, and I'm incredibly disappointed by it.
Golden State's best perimeter defender, the center of their offensive engine, one of their most important players, sitting out right as Cleveland's desperately trying to save their season. So Cleveland won Game 5, and then they won Game 6 too, after Steph Curry gets ejected in that game for fouling out and throwing his mouthpiece.
Foul on Curry, and Curry's going to get it with a technical. He throws his mouthpiece after fouling out of the game.
They became the first, and to this day, still the only team in NBA history to come back from a 3-1 deficit and win the NBA Finals. It's widely considered the greatest comeback in Finals history. Now, here's where it gets loud. After Steph's ejection in Game 6, his wife Ayesha Curry tweeted out, quote, and you guys remember this, "I've lost all respect. Sorry, this is absolutely rigged for money or ratings. I'm not sure which. I won't be silent. Just saw it live. Sorry." That tweet blew up instantly and she later deleted it. But the image remains. It's one of the most viral "the NBA is rigged" moments the league has ever had, coming straight from inside a superstar's own family. And then there's one more detail that connects this whole chapter back to where we started. The referee assigned to that final series, Scott Foster, I'm sure you guys have heard of him, had exchanged over 100 phone calls with Tim Donaghy back in the 2006-2007 season. More calls than Donaghy made to his own bookie. The FBI looked into Scott Foster and found no wrongdoing on his part, so maybe they were just friends, I don't know. But once people learned that detail, it didn't exactly help the league's case. A historic 73-win team, one game away from a championship, loses their best defender to a retroactive call, drops 2 straight, and completes the first 3-1 comeback in finals history, with a very convenient suspension sitting right in the middle of it. Whether you believe it was rigged or not, it's still one of the most talked about stretches of officiating in NBA history. But before we wrap this whole thing up, we've got to go back to where this chapter really should have started, because we've talked about the lotteries, the referees, the gamblers, even the league blocking trades outright. But nothing on this list shows the league's power quite like this next one. A single night that didn't just punish a few players. It ended a championship window before it ever even had the chance to happen. Let's close this video out with the Malice at the Palace. And if you want to know more about it, guess what? We posted a video about it like a year ago. Let's rewind for a second and set the stage properly, because context matters here more than almost any other story in this video. Heading into the 2004-2005 season, the Indiana Pacers were more than just good. They were legitimately the scariest team in the Eastern Conference. The year before, they'd pushed the eventual champion Detroit Pistons to 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Ron Artest was the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. This was not a fluke roster. This was a genuine battle-tested title contender, built to make a real run. And here's the problem. From the league's perspective, nobody outside of Indiana wanted to watch the Indiana Pacers. Small market, no national star power, nowhere near the TV ratings draw of the Lakers or Knicks. A Pacers championship might have been great basketball, but it was a nightmare for business. November 19th, 2004, the Pacers are at the Palace, blowing out the Pistons late in the game. This one should have just ended as a normal, forgettable regular season win. Instead, Ron Artest follows Ben Wallace hard from behind. So Big Ben shoved him back. And for a minute, it looks like a totally standard basketball scuffle.
Motor City. We got big trouble here in the Motor City.
And then, as you all know, a fan threw a drink at Ron Artest while he was laying in the scores table. And that's the moment this becomes historic. Artest jumps into the stands going after the fan. Other players follow him up there. Players are throwing hands with fans in the middle of the arena. It's chaos.
Justice in the stands. Oh, this is awful. Fans are getting involved. Steven Jackson's in the fans.
It's on every news channel in the country within hours, and it becomes the single most infamous moment in league history. Now here's where the league steps in, and this is where it stops being about the fight and starts being about the punishment.
The actions of the players involved wildly exceeded the professionalism and self-control that should fairly be expected from NBA players.
Commissioner David Stern comes down on this like nothing the league has ever seen. 9 players suspended, 146 games combined. Ron Artest, who is their best defender on the team and their emotional engine, gets the rest of the entire season plus the playoffs. 86 total games. The longest suspension for an on-court incident in NBA history. Steven Jackson, who was their second best perimeter player, well, he got 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal, their franchise centerpiece and best overall player, he got 25 games, which was later reduced to 15 on appeal, but still enough to wreck the start of their season. Even Ben Wallace, the guy who got fouled in the first place, gets 6 games for just shoving back. Think about what that actually means. The league didn't just punish the players involved in the stands. They gutted the top of Indiana's rotation, their best defender, their best two-way wing, and their franchise player, all sidelined at the exact same time right as the season was just starting. And the punishment wasn't just severe, it was wildly lopsided. Artest said afterwards that he didn't think Stern was being fair with him at all. And Steven Jackson said out loud what a lot of people were already thinking, that the fans who actually escalated this, the ones throwing bottles and cups from the stands, they barely faced any real consequences, while the players who reacted lost almost an entire season of their careers and millions of dollars in salary. And this wasn't just about punishing 9 players. This was Stern going into full damage control. In the aftermath, the general public started calling NBA players thugs, and Stern took that criticism directly to heart. Just months later, he rolled out a formal dress code for the entire league, banning baggy clothes, chains, do-rags, basically anything that read as hip-hop culture to a nervous corporate audience. Steven Jackson has said flat out that the suspensions were as harsh as they were because Stern was actively trying to reshape the league's image at that exact moment, using their punishment as part of a bigger rebrand.
Why? It was unanimous. 1-0.
And it didn't stop at the dress code. This is the moment that fundamentally changed how physical the NBA was allowed to be. Harder fouls, bench clearing scuffles, guys getting into it after a hard screen. All of that basically disappeared over the next several seasons. The league cracked down on physicality across the board, because after the malice, any sign of aggression got treated like a liability instead of just competitive basketball. A lot of longtime fans still point to this exact night as the moment that the NBA is too soft era began. This was not one single rule change. It was a culture shift. And it happened because one commissioner needed to prove fast that this league was not out of control. The Pacers never recovered. They got bounced early in the playoffs and never got back to the Eastern Conference Finals level again. At least not for another 20 years. They were a legitimate championship caliber roster dismantled in a single night by a punishment that conveniently erased the one team the league had the least financial interest in watching go all the way. So was this a bent envelope or a rigged whistle? No, but it's the exact same result. A small market, unmarketable contender getting removed from title contention, not by a better team beating them, but by the league office itself deciding the punishment. Maybe it's all a coincidence. Maybe the lottery balls just bounce that way. Maybe the whistles even out over an 82-game season, and every business decision is really just business. But when you line all of this up, decade after decade, it stops looking like a coincidence and starts looking like a pattern. The lottery, the whistles, the suspensions, the trades that get blocked and the ones that get rewarded, all of it somehow landing exactly where the league needed it to. And look, none of this means that you have to stop loving this league. I still love the NBA, but loving something doesn't mean you have to pretend that you don't see it. So next time a lottery ball drops in exactly the right city, you're probably right. Next time a whistle blows at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right game, you're probably right about that too. And next time a suspension conveniently clears the path for exactly the team the league wanted to see win, trust your gut. You're probably onto something. Because at this point, we've seen the pattern too many times to keep calling it luck. Just remember this, you don't get this lucky by accident. You get this lucky by design. If you guys did enjoy, be sure to drop a like, comment your hot take, and please help me reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers. I seriously can't hit that goal without you. And if you guys do have some extra free time, be sure to check out one of the videos that are on the screen right now. I'm sure you'll love them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.